We had previously come to the conclusion that the definition of leadership being the ability to achieve the result through people is in a sense flawed. And the reason for that is that in a sense there's two things that you can do to people in order to achieve a result through them. You can either compel them or you can persuade them. The problem with compelling people is that they will feel bullied, and over a period of time they'll resist you. Persuading people is even worse because they feel you're manipulating them and they'll basically come out in conflict against you. So we concluded that, in fact, if that's your definition of leadership, you're likely to cultivate people who aren't going to work for you because they want to, but rather because they have to. You've now done an exercise where you created a collage of the sort of boss that you would work for because you wanted to. And what was apparent in that collage is that you would have found themes similar to the ones that we've got elicited here. In other words, the boss that you would work for because you wanted to would do things like be empathic, supportive, be kind, helpful, compassionate, approachable, listens, be friendly, have a sense of humor, be knowledgeable, wise, empowering, and trusting, be honest, fair, and consistent, coach, give feedback, take risks, challenge, be exemplary, be intelligent, and creative. Now the question is, what's the difference between the boss on the left and the boss on the right? The boss you're going to work for because you have to, and the boss you're going to work for because you want to. And in the first instance, what's apparent is that the difference between these two is not behavioral, because both of them can behave in the same way. Both of them can behave in either compulsive or persuasive ways. The have to boss, for instance, can bully you. He can manipulate you. If you have a look at the want to boss, in the first instance, he can behave in soft and persuasive ways. He can be kind, he can be helpful and compassionate. But it is also possible that this person can act in very hard and confrontative or compulsive ways, because you are asking this person to be fair, to be honest, to be consistent. Now, somebody who's fair isn't always necessarily nice. In other words, he can also act in hard and compulsive ways, which means that it's not useful to distinguish between these two on the basis of how compulsive or persuasive their behavior is, because they can both conceivably behave in exactly the same way. An example of this is the following. Let's say I've got two people that I'm trying to give a pen to, and the one is Janet and the other one is Suzanne. And I go to Janet and I give her the pen and I say to her, Janet, here's the pen, and I give her the pen because she needs the pen. On the other hand, I go to Suzanne and I give her the pen and I say, 2 weeks later I go back to her and I say, Suzanne, 2 weeks ago I gave you a pen, today give me what I want you to give me. Clearly the difference between these two interactions does not sit in my behavior, because in both cases I'm behaving in the same way. If you put a video camera in the corner and you recorded the two interactions, what you'd see on the camera is exactly the same thing. One person handing another person a pen. So in a sense, the difference between the two doesn't sit in the behavior, it sits in my intent. If we viewed my behavior in the case of Janet, in other words, the person that I gave the pen to because she needed the pen, that would be consistent with the person on the right, the boss you'd work for because you wanted to. And the interaction with Suzanne would be consistent with the boss on the left, the boss that I'd work for because I had to. So what becomes apparent is the difference between these two does not sit at the level of behavior, it sits at the level of intent. Because the first question to ask is, with regard to this have to boss, who's the beneficiary of all of the behavior? And what's apparent is that the boss himself is the beneficiary of that behavior. He's there to get something out of you. On the other hand, if you look at the boss that you'd work for because you want to, every one of the things that are in that description actually have the subordinate as the beneficiary of the behavior. I mean, you didn't say, for example, be empathic with me and you, or support me and you, be kind with me and you. You're saying be empathic with me, support me, be kind to me. In other words, you yourself are the beneficiary of this behavior. The person is in the relationship to give something to you. Which suggests that the difference between the boss that you're going to work for because you have to and the boss that you're going to work for because you want to does not sit at the level of behavior, it sits at the level of their intent. This distinction is immensely important because this distinction is the distinction between managing and leading. if one asked oneself who's the beneficiary of, or if you like, what is a manager accountable for what he's getting from the people working for him or what he's giving to them, then clearly he's fundamentally accountable for what he's getting from them. On the other hand, a leader, if you look at how the word leadership operates in context outside of business, for example, the trade union shop steward, it would sound strange if you called the shop steward a union manager. And the reason for this is very specific. In the relationship between the steward and the member is not there for the steward is there for the member. In other words, the leader is the steward, is the custodian, is the one who's supposed to be doing the giving here, which suggests that it is far more appropriate to describe the role that the union leader plays as a leader rather than as a manager. A further important point to bear in mind with regard to this distinction is that this is also the distinction between control and power. Because in the first instance, the question is, who's genuinely powerful? The person you're going to work for because you have to, or the person that you're going to work for because you want to? And clearly the person who's got real power is the person that you work for because you want to. And in a sense, the reason is obvious. If you work for somebody because you want to, and that person asks you to do something, you will do it with commitment. You will do it with pleasure. In a sense, you are loyal to the person. You give them the right to ask you to do things. You are on their side, which means to say when you work for somebody because you want to, that person has genuine power. On the other hand, if we consider the distinction between the Tony and the Fred interactions, and as we indicated before, I go to Tony and I say to Tony, in 1980 I did the thing that you have to do and what I did worked. Don't argue with me, shut up and go and do what I did. And to Fred, I say to him, Fred, in 1980 I did the thing that you have to do and what I did worked. It might be helpful to you, take a look at it. Clearly, if this is consistent with my behavior in both cases, the question is, who's bound to become loyal to me over time? And clearly, Fred is bound to become loyal to me over time. Which means to say, of the two, who's going to be work for me because he wants to? And clearly it'll be Fred who will work for me because he wants to. That suggests that of the two, it is in the case of Fred where I have power. However, the question to ask here is, in which one of these two interactions am I trying to control the outcome? And clearly it is in the Tony case where I'm trying to control the outcome. In order for me to have the Fred interaction, I have to be willing to entrust the outcome to him, which means I personally lose control over the outcome. Now this is very important because it suggests that control and power are actually mutually exclusive things. We're very sloppy with the use of these two words. They don't mean the same thing at all. In fact, you only have power based on the degree to which you're willing to forego control. So if we look at the difference between the boss you're going to work for because you have to and the boss that you're going to work for because you want to, clearly it is in the relationship with the boss that you work for because you have to that the essence of that relationship is about control. So the intent of a manager is to get something out of people working for him. He therefore wants to predict the outcome. He therefore will be in the relationship to control the people working for him. On the other hand, the leader is there to give something to his people, and because that is the case, they become loyal to him and he becomes powerful.